And welcome back. And we are moving into our first conversation for today with clinical psychologist Deshane Gutierrez. And we're talking about an upcoming summer camp where she's offering psychoeducational assessments. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for having me here this morning.
Now, this is a very interesting topic, and I think we can go many different directions. But I want to talk, first of all, about what the aim is in a psychoeducational assessment.
Okay, so the main aim of a psychoeducational assessment is to evaluate a person's cognitive abilities, their academic achievement, their personality, and social and emotional functioning. Mm-hmm. So it's to understand more in depth of why a person is experiencing certain things. So for example, if a child is having difficulty at school, you want to know why that child isn't improving even though the teachers have implemented different strategies. You're at home, you're helping your child, and you're not getting the information. Mm-hmm. What is affecting that child from learning? Is it that they have a learning disability? Is it emotional distress? You know, children do have depression or anxiety, so that could also impact what they're doing at school. Mm-hmm. So a psychoeducational assessment will help give some clarity in terms of what is going on with that child.
Now, as a clinical psychologist, you are trained to be able to administer these types of assessments.
Yes.
Why do you need this special skill set to figure out why a child is advancing or not advancing?
Because there's more underlying issues. And so when you do the assessment, there are standardized assessments to understand, okay, what are the skill set needed? Mm-hmm. So at school, we learn how to do maths, we learn the reading, comprehension, but there are basic skills that you need to be able to do those things. So we want to evaluate, do they have those skills to actually do the coursework? So the assessment isn't tests that we'll get in the classroom. Mm. It's to figure out how that person problem solve, how that person's process information. So
it's not like the PSE, for example, that kind of just rates how effective the learning has been up to a certain stage.
It's not like PSE.
At least for that day.
Yeah.
No.
It has nothing to do with PSE. So you don't get 90% and you say, yes, I got a high grade. No. It's more or less a range in terms of how are they functioning compared to other children. What is their preference in learning? What is easy for them and what is really hard for them? So pretty much the assessment is to understand what is easy for them and what is hard, and their strategy. Mm-hmm. So for example, some person process information a little bit slower, and so some might tap within that time. So we know, well, it's not a distraction that they're doing, it's helping them to process the information. Mm-hmm. So it's learning and understanding that unique person in the individual way of how they interpret the world around us. So we all have our different ways of viewing the world and understanding the world. So doing a full evaluation helps you to understand how does that child views the world.
Traditionally, when I was going to school about 10 years ago, teachers just considered the child lazy or rude. What is the value of being able to scientifically say, and I just want to lash you, put you in a corner, or put you outside of class, what they used to do was, but in actually getting a scientific assessment of what's going on?
You know, some parents, after I've told them, okay, your child isn't being lazy, this is really what's happening, they're like, oh my gosh, thank you. I used to get so mad and frustrated that I would want to give up because I had to teach them and then they get it, you know? So it's giving parents some clarity. And in terms of what's different between then and now, is now we have more awareness of what really is happening. So we're not just going based on are they producing the work or aren't they producing the work. Yeah. It's understanding why they aren't producing the work. So I think that is the question now. It's not that you're being lazy, it's why you aren't doing what I think you should be able to do, and understanding that each person's learning trajectory is different. So you may have 3 or 4 bright children and you have your last child and you're like, I know they get it, you know?
Which happens to a lot of parents.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, Deshane, in this day and age, the internet is a wonderful tool, but it can also pose its challenges. People jump online and they do these quick quizzes and they determine that their child perhaps has attention deficit disorder or mild autism or auditory processing disorder, all legitimate developmental issues. But what is the danger if you classify a child without getting a proper assessment?
One, there are many diagnoses that you could have that have similar patterns of behavior.
Yeah.
And so just deciding that, well, this sounds like my child, and saying, well, my child has this disorder, then while you may do it to want to be helpful, it may be at a disadvantage, because suppose your child doesn't have that particular disorder that you're saying, well, my child have ADHD. It could be your child have a learning disability, but because of the learning disability, they move around in the classroom. They move around a lot because they want to distract themselves. It's not that they can't do it, or in different settings they're able to do it. Now, you can't look at a child and say, well, you know what? You have ADHD, you have learning disability, you have autism. You can't just look at them. There's different profiles that a person will have for you to say that they have it. And also it has to happen in different settings. Is it just when they're at school? Is it at home? Is it with a particular guardian? You want to be able to understand the child's full picture. So looking at the child, you can't really say. Now, if you go on the internet, it's good to have that awareness. You know, if you suspect your child, then it's good to do the assessment.
Yeah.
To know really, does my child really have this, or he doesn't, or she doesn't? It may be something else.
What would an assessment like this, the psychoeducational assessment, reveal to a parent?
It could reveal in terms of, like I said, the child's strengths and weaknesses, their cognitive abilities.
You're talking like subjects, like they're more math geared versus language geared?
Okay, well, for a full assessment, we'll have a cognitive test. So the cognitive test is what we would call the IQ test, just to see their intelligence level. And then they'll have the academics achievement, which is more to say how are they doing with maths, English, reading comprehension, and their writing skills. So it's 4 different domains that the achievement test would administer. So that will see how is this child doing in maths, writing, reading, and comprehension. And then they'll also have the social aspect. How do they interact with other children? How do they interact with adults? How do they groom themselves? You know, basic adaptive skills. Can they function on their own? And also their emotional in terms of depression, anxiety, oppositional behaviors and stuff like that. So it's a full compact, it assesses different components.
Have you been able to interact with the teachers? Because from the teacher standpoint, I could imagine you have 30 kids. This sounds like a very involved, specialized skill that you have to go to school for 4 or 5 years to acquire. How can a teacher incorporate some of what you're doing, because they have to actually apply to get the child from one stage to another?
So I always try to interact with teachers, and I let them know I understand a class of 30, crazy. Teachers have a skill set that I think is very good in terms of they are able to manage a full classroom, and there may be 1 and 2 children that may have difficulties.
Yeah.
And so I always tell them, monitor the children. Teachers normally have their own assessment of the child. So this child is this child is that. So that is good. So I encourage them to make note, because one of the forms that I often give to teachers after talking to them, it's an assessment that teachers fill out. So they also input in terms of how the child is behaving at school. How frequent is the child displaying this behavior? Is it once in a while? Is it consistently? What is the intensity? Does it impact the classroom? So teachers are involved. I always try to ask teachers to participate, and I also let them know how this could be beneficial to them. So after the assessment is done, you understand a little bit more what's happening with your student, and that makes it less stressful for you, because it's stressful when you're like, why is this child behaving this way?
Yeah.
So if you have that clarity now, you know how to modify your classroom setting so that way it will be less stressful for you, but also the child will benefit in the classroom.
And that was one of my questions. How do you know, I remember being a student, how do you know when to separate from something which is temporary or something which is a disorder? Because we watch Oprah and everything is a disorder. You sit too long as a disorder. If you move too much, that's a disorder. Science has made the world into a sickness. So how are you able to distinguish and separate between a child who is going through something maybe at home? Maybe the parents are quarreling at home for a short period of time, or maybe just doesn't like the teacher, or whatever it is. How do you separate something that's temporary from something that needs some sort of therapeutic or some sort of scientific assistance?
So one, developmental history is very important.
As a terrible student, that's why.
Your developmental history will tell a lot in terms of what were you like from the time you were born, your interactions with different people. So your history in terms of not just at school, how were you at home, and what changed and what time frame we have when the change started. So if you were a child that initially you weren't giving trouble, then something happened, or a year changed, totally different student now, then we try to understand what happened in that time.
Yeah.
And then we also assess, we talk to the child as well, what is happening, you know. Not all children are very versed vocabulary, so we have drawings and we have them, let them express themselves. So we try to get a full picture. It's not something that you rush.
Yeah.
The assessment do take time, and to analyze also takes a lot more time.
How do I know if my child needs a psychoeducational assessment?
So for our psychoeducational assessments, one, it all depends on the which class they're in.
Okay.
So preschool children, they may have delay in talking. In terms of learning the alphabets, they may have struggle remembering the alphabet. And this isn't just September you're talking and by end of September you're saying something is wrong with this child. But based on different interventions that you've tried at home or tried at school and the child still hasn't progressed, then you want to know, is there something more that's happening? So once you're seeing challenges that you normal developmentally that you expect your child to,
Like they don't want to do homework.
yes,
That happens.
they don't want to do, yes. So it's normal sometimes to not want to do homework
There
and
you
to
go.
say, well, I don't have any homework today, mommy, you know. But every day, or if the child doesn't want to go to school, if when the child is at school, their teacher may say, well, it's too quiet or too loud. And it's not to rush, but to have the teacher monitor the child, and you as the parents as well, to monitor how your child interact.
Yeah.
You know, are they grasping it? When they're reading, how long or how laborious it is for them to read one sentence. And is it a long sentence? Is it a short sentence? So you want to be able to monitor and see what's happening for different levels.
Yeah. It's easier for parents who have other children because they kind of have a developmental marker. But for first-time parents, they may not be able to distinguish what is normal and what is not. And nobody likes when the teacher says, you know, little John or little Jane is not keeping up. How do you manipulate that situation in being able to get them assessed, but also work with the teachers? Because we have some fantastic teachers out there, very overwhelmed in some cases and still managing. But there's some who perhaps have been lacking in that extra sensitivity. How do you manipulate that situation?
So it's good that you said that. Just last week I was presenting to some staff and I was explaining to them, how do you tell parents that you suspect that there may be something wrong with their child?
Yeah.
And some teachers said that it's not too hard for them, but in terms of saying, okay, these are what I'm seeing. So rather than saying, I think a child has this disorder, you can tell a child, well, I'm noticing these in your child, and I've tried certain things, and it seems that he or she's having difficulty grasping it. I'm thinking that it's something that you could look more into, because I'm not really sure what it is that I'm seeing. I'm just noticing these, and I'm letting you know as the teacher what I'm seeing. Are you seeing this at home? So that way, yes, I'm seeing it at home. No, I'm not seeing it at home. Or I've heard about it. I wasn't sure. I think you're just lazy and I want to do homework, and it's the same thing. So now you're having a pattern.
Yeah.
The teacher is saying what she's seeing at school. You're saying, if you collaborate that story, or how similar or how different it is.
Yeah.
And then you say, wouldn't you want to look into it more?
Yeah.
So what about the fear factor though? Because I could imagine being in a situation where, you know, a clinical psychologist comes up to me and says, you know what, your child has XYZ. Go through the whole long version, and at the end says there's a clinical definition for this. Child has dyslexia. And how do you as a parent or as a teacher move beyond the fear of what does this mean? How do I monitor this? I don't have all the tools. I didn't go to school. I don't have the qualifications to be able to deal with this. How does a parent, a layperson, deal with the fear that comes from whatever you're clinically diagnosed with?
So, when you give a
No, go ahead.
when you give a diagnosis, you don't just give them the paper or say you have this diagnosis. There's a feedback session. So after the report is completed, we meet along with the parents again and we discuss. So this is what we've been seeing. If there's a diagnosis, this is the diagnosis, and we explain it. So we try not to have the parent leave the office without understanding what it is that they're experiencing or how. So there's a recommendation section in the report, and we talk about what can you do. Now, in Belize, there's limitation in terms of the resources that you could tap into, terms of organizations that you could go, human resources as well, and sometimes the cost in terms of can you hire someone to work especially with your child. So I try to ask parents what they can do. I try to figure out, okay, so this is what this child needs. How can you do that at home without have to depending too much on what is missing in our country? But what can you do? What can you do to start at least that baseline, that if the gap was here, you could at least reduce it a little, and then you start that process.
Or supplement what they won't get in school.
Yeah, supplement what they don't get in school.
This brings me to a very important point. I've known parents who've had to take their children outside of Belize to be able to get these types of assessment done. You're offering it in a free summer camp over the summer.
Yes.
To a particular group of people.
Yes.
Well, this is great for the children who get into the camp, but why was this something that you were interested in doing?
Well, I realized one, it was a shortage, and two, it started with something personal. So I also had a sister that she took long to learn, and for us, we also thought she was being lazy. And so learning now and knowing that it's not about being lazy, that there is something else, I want to be able to at least try to help people. So I'm offering a free psychoeducational camp this July. And I'm starting at home. So I'm starting with Southern Belize. I'm originally from Simbay. So I'm starting with Southern Belize. So it's for 7 days. And I'm hoping to get at least 14 children.
14
children.
Over the course of 7 days.
Over the course of 7 days.
And these assessments take quite a bit of time.
Yes. So I'm having another clinical psychologist from Trinidad and Tobago to come in to assist me for those 7 days. To offer the assessment. So for 7 days, we'll be doing assessments, and thereafter, we'll be analyzing. And then when we're finished with the report, we'll call back parents to come in to discuss the results.
What's the ideal age group that you would like to work with?
Ideal age group from 6 to 8. The reason why is they're pretty much between infant 1 and standard 1, that age range. And we want to be able to catch it early. So if they have any learning difficulties or anything, the earlier we get it, the better it is for that child. Because when the child is in a higher class, the interventions become more greater, the cost becomes higher. So if we could start from the beginning and catch it early detection. It helps the child in the long run, it helps the parent in the long run, that they'll be able to understand what's happening and how to start the intervention at the earlier process. So especially with reading, for example, if you don't have the basics reading component, when you reach standard 3, it becomes even harder. And then now you have to...
Every other subject will involve reading.
And then you have to finish your schoolwork for school, but also then you'll need more remedial.
It's also a perception thing though, because if you grow up thinking I'm dumb or lazy, then it affects you for the rest of your life.
Yes, because then your self-esteem get affected.
And we look at dropouts. We've never checked with people who have dropped out from school, know, whether or not there was another disorder there that perhaps hindered their process of learning. Now, is it that some children will just not be able to learn? Or is it just that we have to find different ways to tap into that potential?
So when you say learning, it's difficult to say to learn. Is it learn at school? Is it to learn and function in the community? In
More academics. I'm talking academics.
Academically, not everyone is academically inclined. But that doesn't mean that they can't be successful. They could tap into what it is that their strength. Now, depending on the severity of the disorder, then we'll be able to determine, okay, do we just want this person to be able to adapt? And adapting means that they'll still be able to understand some social cues, how to go to the grocery store, how to buy, how to check your change. So learning is every day, is a thing that we do every day. Academically, there will be some children that won't be as successful in the school. And that's okay. And I think that part is what we need to stress. It's okay to not be academically inclined. you know, books isn't always everything. I mean, it's helpful, but you have different strengths. You have different things that you could be good at. So some people may not be good at school, but they're awesome in the kitchen, you know.
Yeah.
They could still have their own restaurant and running it with help, of course, but they'll be able to know how to run the kitchen.
Yeah.
So it's not looking at it as just what can you do academically, because academics, it's good, yes, but it doesn't mean that others who have other skill set isn't just as good.
Yeah.
What I wanted to know was, you're doing it in a 14 kids. I know it's involved, it's an entire process, it's very scientific. But how do we scale this? How do we get it to more kids? How do we get more teachers involved? How do you get more kids out of the, 120,000 kids that we have? How do we get more of them involved?
Well, I'm starting that process, and hopefully there's a snowball effect. Yeah, so hopefully there's a snowball effect that more people will be willing to tap into this field. It's a much needed field. It's also promoting an awareness of the importance of a psychoeducational assessment. You know, how can this be beneficial? And I think that is one of the main reasons it's good to be here, that I'm able to explain to people the benefits of getting a psychoeducational assessment done.
What about parents who just don't want to know? What about parents who see signs and want to believe that the children are going to grow out of it?
Yeah.
What are they doing in terms of, I want to just say that they're obviously posing more challenges to their child even as they progress to adulthood, but what do you say to them?
That yes, it's hard.
Yeah.
And especially when you're seeing the sign, it's very hard to even say that, you know what, my child, there's something really wrong and I'm not really sure how to help. And I think parents' concern isn't just that the child may have the disorder, it's also that I might not be able to help my child. And I don't want anybody to take advantage of my child. If they're being labeled, then they'll be looked at differently, they'll get mistreated. So parents do that out of protection. Just that long term, when the child is older, it becomes even harder for them to protect their child. So while it may be scary, and there's a lot of questions, trying to get the answers may help you feel that initially may feel I can't do anything for my child but protect. But you may learn that there are certain things that you could start to do to help your child. So in the long term, it'll be more beneficial.
What about when the challenge that these children have, isn't overt? You know, it looks like a normal child, they're able to function, but they just can't pass that C mark or struggle in particular areas like certain concepts, memorization, which are some areas where people can have challenges. How do you talk to a parent about how to advocate with teachers? Because teachers will say, okay, well, you're not, you don't have a visible learning disability. So maybe I just think that you don't keep up, you don't study enough, you don't do your homework.
Yes, and so part of it is trying to educate as much as possible. Indeed, if you don't have teachers buy-in, it becomes harder at school. So even if you have the report and the teacher is like, I don't believe this, then it becomes harder. So that's why, as part of my process is when I initially sent out schools to some letters to some school, I asked them, I'm willing to go and do a free presentation to discuss what it is that you're looking for. So I'm doing it so that they could have that understanding and trying to educate teachers as much as possible in terms of there are more things than a child not wanting to do it. So that education process is very important for the parent and for the child. Now, for parents who teacher isn't as willing initially, talk to the principal. There are times when the principal could have better input than the parent in terms of how to help a particular child. And most of the schools that I've worked with, the principals have been very accommodating and helpful, and they could help the teacher process what it is that they're going through. Because I could understand teachers have a lot of work. So for them, they see it as more work. So if the principal, if they have the support of their admin, then they may not feel as overwhelmed.
So if admin tells them this child may get extra time to complete work because it takes them just a bit longer to understand, then it can be instituted as a policy for the school.
Yes, and that teacher won't feel like I will get in trouble if.
A lot of times with special needs parents, and I think this is maybe a conversation we could have a whole different time, is that they have to be the advocate. We do have NARCI and the special education unit and the itinerant teachers, but they're itinerant, they're not always there.
Yeah.
So the parent is the one who really takes on the role after they've met with someone like you and gotten a clear report as to where the strengths and weaknesses are and special learning styles, that have to advocate continuously. Each class, each teacher,
Yes.
as their children progress through school, and it's a challenge.
It is.
Yeah.
You know, like, we keep on talking about it, and I know the perception, well, at least perception that I know a lot of people have, is that it's a bad thing. And they miss the fact that you keep on saying that it's an identification of both weaknesses and strengths.
Yes.
You know, could you talk to us more about the approach? Do you approach this from the standpoint of saying, listen, he ain't good academically, but he's a genius. I have a friend who his son just graduated from Horizon, and he's artistic. He's a genius with the computer, but he's not academically inclined. And they somehow Horizon, and big up to them, were able to somehow work with that child, and the child graduated from. So what is the approach that you take? Because some people, I was dyslexic, you know, and I never understood it until I got to law school. When a teacher actually said, read this for me. And I was like, and he said, man. And then because I was that way, I learned to speed read. So my weakness, which was a weakness for years because I was diagnosed properly and had some assistance, became a strength. How do you approach this?
Well, one of the things I like to do before I tell parents about their weaknesses, this is what your child can do. And you know, when you do the clinical interview, you get a lot of background information about the family, and so you use that in terms of focusing on the strengths as well, and then you talk about, okay, so these are some of the challenges, but these are some of the things that you can do to help. So I think, while not just talking about the weaknesses, but how can you help with the weaknesses? Because remember, there's a fear factor.
Yeah.
So you want to reduce that fear factor and say, well, your child is not hopeless, you're not hopeless, there are things that you can do. And being also honest in terms of, so I understand that there's limitations in terms of resources, but these are some of the things that you can do. And I think that usually helps.
Now, what do you tell the child? At 6 years old, they may not be able to understand. By 8, they will. And children don't like being different at that age. They want to be a part of the crowd like everyone else, and they may take on an additional anxiety or concern if they're special and need extra time and people think they're dyslexic or whatever it is. What do you talk to your child? What do you tell your child?
Okay, so first, from the time they're doing testing, I tell parents, don't tell your child that you're doing a test. Test is a negative word for little children. So what I would like
adults too?
Some adults, yes. In terms of, I let them know that what we're going to do is some fun stuff. We're going to do some puzzles, we're going to do some drawings, and I want to understand what is easy for you and what is hard, okay? That is all I want to do. Understand what's easy and what's hard, and if there's anything that you get wrong, don't worry. I just want to understand what's easy and what's hard. So I stress that something is to figure out what's easy for them and what's hard.
Okay.
And children are very perceptive. So if they're in school and they realize that they're not getting something already, they already know. They don't need to get a wrong on their paper, or teachers say no, it's not, you know, people to say different things. We often know when we're doing something a little bit off.
Yeah.
So they also have that.
Instinct.
So that instinct, yes. So telling them, I want to understand what's easy for you and what's hard, so that we could help mommy and we could help teacher, they're usually okay with it. So that usually.
What can a parent do? I can't get to invite, and I'm suspicious of certain things. Is there anything I can do in the interim before I get to you? Because how many other clinical psychologists are there in the country?
I believe there's another clinical psychologist in the country.
But you're the only one.
I'm the only registered. Yes.
In the country. So there's a shortage. You're very diplomatic when you say that there's a shortage of resources. But what can I do as a parent, as a teacher, if I can't get to you? What can I do? Is there anything online? Is there anything that you recommend as a holdover?
Okay, so if you can't get to me, there's Narcissism Center. In terms of what can you do in the interim is to start to write down the behaviors that you're seeing, the difficulties that you're seeing. That way, whichever help you get, whether with me or with Narcy, they already have a lot of the information that is needed to help. In terms of what Marlene said, you have to be your advocate for your child. So if you're already suspecting certain things, the internet is still helpful in terms of the resources that you could start to do. So even though you don't have a diagnosis, you may have, well, my child have difficulty with reading. So there are numerous free resources online in terms of how to help with reading from a basic level. So even though you may not have a full report, there are certain things that you can do in the meantime to help your child.
And even the Inspiration Center sometimes has people that
Come
come in
in,
to help
yeah.
and do assessments.
And this summer, they
Yeah.
usually do in summers as well.
And that's a great way to segue. I know you have clear points as to what people can identify that may demonstrate they need to get their child assessed. So we have, I know, from preschool right through. So let's look through some of the warning signs and some of the symptoms that people can look out for, right? And we start with from preschool age.
Yes.
You can detect from preschool age.
Yes, there are certain things that a child is supposed to learn by the time they're finishing preschool. So in terms of, are they able to talk by the time they reach preschool? Are they learning at least 10 numbers? Do they know the alphabets? Are they learning the alphabets? Can they differentiate between circles, triangles, the basic things that they're already getting? So assessing them at an early age, there are certain basic skills, like I keep saying, in terms of there's a skill set. How do they grip the crayon, the pencil? Do they have good motor skills, fine motor skills already? So there are certain things that you already want to look for when they're in preschool age.
Poor ability to follow routines and instructions
Yes.
at a preschool age. You mean the no isn't acceptable? I don't want to.
So like everything else, everything is frequency
Yeah.
and intensity.
Yeah.
So little children will always want to get up and do their little things, but
Yeah.
after a while, mid-October, there should be some pattern already that has been created. Are they able to follow that pattern? So I think that is it in terms of, it's not that you don't follow because you'll be running around with them, but after you've created that routine, can you function with a routine?
And from infant 1 to standard 2, your middle-aged,
Yes.
middle school children.
Yes, so in terms of the B's and the D's, the M's and the W's, so they transpose those. So instead of B, they put D. Instead of M, they use
That's your
W.
dyslexic.
Yeah, that's-
Yeah, so you were talking about being dyslexic earlier. The songs and words pronunciation, so they know the alphabets, but can they know the songs? And can they identify? Can they blend the words? So basic reading skills, can they blend? What is their word count? What is their phonemic skills? So you want to be able to assess those. We also teach a lot of sight words at school. Can they identify sight words? Now, sight words are very important.
What else? Yeah.
So sight words are like the is, the D, you know, basic words that you don't have to spend a lot of time pronouncing. Is as you see it, you know what the word is. So that you spend more of your cognitive time processing the bigger words, breaking down the bigger words. So the sight words is as you see it, you know it.
Okay.
Isn't some of this natural though? I mean, isn't it natural that it will take you some time for some of this? So are you assessing the pace at which it's happening and the time when it's happening as opposed to the fact that it is there? There's nothing wrong.
So it includes all of those. So the time, how long, all of that is included. So when you do an assessment, remember I said that we're assessing at different levels. So reading has 4 different components. Basic reading, reading comprehension, total reading, oral language. So it incorporates all of those. So you're not just looking, oh, you have a deficit in this area. It's what is the profile like together? Do you have a deficit? So it's not just, I have problem with the plus and the minus sign.
Yeah.
You have a disorder. No.
No, it's going deeper.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's go into the upper grades as we round this off. So it's standard 3 to standard 6.
Yes. So again, the reverse letters. Do you see house, home, you know, as you see the letters shape. So I don't know if you guys remember in primary school when you were doing spelling, they'll have the shape of the words and you had to fill in. So some people may have difficulty filling in because the minute they see H and they see E at the end of the word, it could be house, but it could be home as well. So they may create their own word based on the profile of the word. They may have difficulty learning the prefixes of the word, the beginning and the end of the words. They have problem putting that together. Already, by the time they reach standard 3, they already know that they have struggle with reading. So they may not want to read out loud. Yeah. They may not want to go to school. Then you may start to see more of the behavioral issues taking place because now it's see of face, right?
As you go higher up, though, what is the contribution of probably bad teaching? Because we have good teachers, but there are certain institutions that have trouble in terms of the quality of the teaching that they get. When you get to standard 6, how much of it might be the lack of a foundation from a teacher in lower grades coming up?
So the assessment will still be able to tell us if it's teaching issue or if it's something more. Yeah. Because remember, like I said, I don't give a test that you get in school. So it's not about what all you know, it's how you process information. So even some of them that are new to you, but how do you process new information? Because learning is also about how do you process new information. Can you process new information? So it's not just, okay, it's bad teaching, it could be more. What if it's bad teaching, we'll be able to know.
This is fascinating.
Yeah. Now it's, and I'm glad you said that because I know you are having your camp, as you mentioned, in July. We don't want to miss that opportunity because this is great for 14 families, really. Yes. Because when a parent struggles with one child, it's the rest of the family that is impacted. So 14 families get this assessment for free once they're from Stan Creek or Toledo. But you work in Belize City as well. Can people still be able to access you and perhaps book an appointment to see if their child needs an assessment?
Yes. So I work in Belize City 3 days a week. Okay. So if parents want to be able to contact me, my phone number is 636-0823. I also have a website. They could go on the website. It's cpsychbelize.com. I also have a Facebook page at Counseling and Psychological Services, and they could stop in.
Yeah.
Can I ask a very unfair question? Which is, we just had the PSC results. If you were to guess, what's the need for psychoeducational assessments? And if you were to fathom a guess, maybe 1 in every 2 children would need it. What's the value of getting this right? Do you think that how percentage points that would increase the performance of PSC?
Well, I believe a psychoeducational assessment before they reach standard 6 would be very crucial. Because 1, you want to be able to know where that child is functioning at. You don't want them to reach standard 6. They do an assessment. They realize that their reading level is at a standard 3. Because then within that academic year, it's going to be hard to reach that level to pass the PSC for what it is that it works. So doing an assessment early on will help give that clarity so that by the time they reach standard 6, if that child, for example, has slow processing speed, you know that time tests will be difficult for them because they process a little bit slower. It doesn't mean that they don't know the information, just the time that it takes to process and to write down the work takes a little bit longer. So an assessment will help in terms of we'll understand where our children is at. You know, PSC is a time base, so there are so many things that you have to do within a little bit of time. Now, if you don't have a fast processing speed, your scores will be very low.
Fast or average,
Fast or average, your scores will be low, so that will impact it as well.
Or the anxiety factor, because children have anxiety.
Yes.
And that leads me to my final question, which is, how much does this assessment take into account the other social aspects? Children in this country live in poor homes. They may be malnourished. They may be facing abuse at home. We know, and I know you do work in St. Martin's Primary School in Belize City, we know the level of trauma that they're exposed to with the violence. How much does that impact their learning capabilities? And will this test be able to, this assessment, be able to detect that?
Yes. So trauma or environment greatly impacts their performances at school. There once was a child who wasn't doing well at school, and parents couldn't understand why. We did the full test. Cognitively, she has the capacity, but given her history, it showed that emotionally there were a lot of things going on. And now parents like to believe that children shouldn't be stressed. Children shouldn't have anxiety or depression. They're too young. They don't pay bills, but they do, and that's the reality. Depression and anxiety, trauma doesn't have an age factor. From the time you're young, you could be traumatized from very young. So that affects in terms of how you process. That affects what is your output at school. So the assessment is half academic, cognitive, but the other half focuses on the social, emotional, and personal factors. So their personality, what is their personality like? What is their temperament? What is their environment like? How do they interact with their peers, with their adults? So it's a variation in terms of, we try to tap into every different domain so that we have a full picture, because we realize that your social, your emotional, and your personality also impacts how you perform.
Okay, that's a lot. Now I want to get a psychoeducational assessment, do you?
Yeah, I needed one.
So,
Give me a call.
how do people sign up for the free assessments? Once again, it's only for people from Toledo and Stamp Creek.
Okay, so some schools have already, I've already presented to them, and they will select 2 students from their school. I have 5 spots available, and it's first come, first serve.
Yeah.
Email me, send me a text, give me a call, Facebook me, and I'll respond. The first 5. So there's no big extravagant ways. Just try to contact me as early as possible.
And you said the ideal age is 6 to 8.
Ideal age is 60.
And when is the camp going to be held?
So the camp will be held July 23rd to the 31st of July.
Okay, all right. So if your child hasn't been selected through the school, and you know that perhaps based on the warning signs that we've discussed, definitely reach out and make that contact. And the same if someone is from a different part of the country, they can
Yes,
contact
they could give
you.
me a call, message, the same process,
Yeah.
just let me know.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, and best of luck. We are going to go ahead and take a break now, and when we come back, it'll be to talk about the 2nd annual Women in Fisheries Forum.